Welcome to Precinct 444, a podcast by the National Law Enforcement Museum located in Washington, D.C. Here at Precinct 444, we cover a wide range of topics surrounding American law enforcement through our 4 core shows and bonus content. Today and in future bonus episodes, we will feature an artist from our current exhibit, Officers as Artists, so they can talk about their law enforcement careers and art interests. Be sure to check back every other week as we publish more episodes featuring an artist. And remember, our core shows are released every other Wednesday, so don't miss those. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and come see us in Washington, D.C.
All right, welcome back to Precinct 444. We are recording another installment of our Officers as Artists series. I'm here today with Kevin Cotter, who's one of our artists that's featured in our exhibit today. So welcome, Kevin.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And I'm going to let us get started and have you introduce yourself. So tell us who you are, give us a little bit of a summary of your law enforcement career, and introduce us to the piece that you have in the exhibit.
My name's Kevin Cotter, senior. I'm a retired LAPD officer. I did 20 years with LAPD. Before that, I worked high-rise steel for 20 years, and then before that, I was in the Army. During my time as a police officer, I worked the streets the whole time, other than one short 9-month stint in a specialized admin type job. Other than that, I spent most of my time in patrol. I was a motor cop for many years, and then I did a couple loans to detectives. MAC table, which is major assault crimes in Wilshire Division, and then I worked at the end of my career, I worked on loan to robbery homicide, looking for a serial killer. And luckily, we were able to catch him right before I retired. And that's about it. I worked the streets pretty much to the day I retired. That's where my enjoyment was. I never wanted to be a desk job. So
Definitely. And I'm sure that being on the street was a really exciting career to have, and especially in the LAPD, where a lot happens out in LA. So definitely never a dull moment, I'm sure. And that kind of ties into the piece that you have in the exhibit. Your portrait, BCMC, is actually a self-portrait from, was it a photograph of you while you were on the job?
yes, it was a cell phone picture. Somebody took of me. I forget, we were at some function in 2011. And
Definitely.
what happened, the reason I painted this was I told my wife I didn't start painting again till I retired. I just didn't make the time for it. So I told my wife, and I had family members knew I drew. And when I was young, I was actually pretty good. And I have them give me for Christmas, easels and, oil. I did mostly oil paints. And so I told her when I retire, I'm going to get back into it, which I did. So the first thing I did is I painted some pictures of fellow motor officers that were mentors and different people as gifts. I've never sold a painting, but I did it as gifts for some of these guys. And then my wife says to me, well, you know what, why don't you do one of yourself for your own family? And I go, okay. So I did this one. I was shocked that you guys picked this painting, but BCMC is an LAPD acronym. It means Big City Motor Cop, kind of a thing we use with each other. And so that's why it's titled that. And LA has the largest municipal motor squad in the US, at least when I was there. There's around 300 motor officers out of a 10,000 man police department. So
We do have it's a good mix of law enforcement related pieces and pieces that are done by law enforcement officers, but the subject matter isn't related to law enforcement at all. But it is really, it's a very interesting piece in the fact that it's a portrait of yourself and a very key part of your career, a piece of your career that was extra meaningful to you, which I think is really a very powerful story that comes out of the many powerful stories that are in this exhibit. It's very personal in a different way than the rest of them are. It's very unique. And you mentioned, kind of as you were explaining the painting, that you didn't do much painting during your career, but took it up again in retirement. What inspired you to start taking painting back up in your retirement?
First of all, I did a little bit of drawing in that. The only admin job I ever had was with the department was I got asked to work the DNC planning group for 2000 when they had the DNC in LA. One of the sergeants was a partner of mine that I worked down in Watson Patrol. They asked me to apply because they knew I had a construction background. I worked high-rise steel for 20 years, and part of that, at night, I taught apprentice school. I taught them how to become certified welders, and I taught them how to read blueprints. Well, I know how to draw up plans too. So on some job sites when I was working, we didn't have time for the architects and engineers. I would draw a detail up and give it to the rep for the architects who come out, and they'd sometimes laugh and go, "What are you doing here? You should be working for us." So during the DNC, they had me drawing the plans for the security perimeter and the details for the gates and everything, because that's when the anarchists started in Seattle. So Antifa started. That's when they came down to LA and decided to, disrupt the DNC. But we were ready for them. And part of it is because we used a Long Beach Grand Prix security system. So I drew all those things up. And then I would draw cartoons of things that, like one of your other officers said, got in trouble. I didn't get in trouble, but I came close. But anyway, but I always wanted to get back into it, but I didn't take the time. I was always working two jobs most of my adult life. I got married young and had kids, and now I got 9 grandkids, and but now that I'm retired, I have time to do something that I want to do for me. I don't paint for anybody else. I paint things that mean something to me. And it's like music, you should do something that So I like all things mechanical. I have old cars, old motorcycles. And motorcycles, I love. Being a motor cop was the best job. I'll tell anybody, that was the best job I ever had. It was exciting. I love riding. And so I can draw a motorcycle or anything mechanical. I'm good at drawing. So that's why, do something, because you can get the details right. So that's why I did this painting, part of the reason. So
Definitely. And I think it's like, I'm an artist myself. I do watercolor paintings and mostly watercolor portraits. And it really is, you have to like the paintings that are things that I really enjoy and things that I'm really into, those come out so easily. And I feel like it wasn't any effort to do it. But sometimes like I'll paint things for friends and things like that like for gifts and stuff like that. And sometimes they just take longer than
yeah, you got to
what
research
I do
and
for
figure
myself.
it out. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
But both of them are gratifying, but it does. Like the things that you know and the things that you care most about, they are painted so much more seamlessly than anything else.
Right.
Um, and kind of speaking of that, like you mentioned drawing like cartoons in the office and things like that. And we kind of talked a little earlier. You've done some paintings of colleagues as gifts and things like that. Have you ever shown your artwork to your colleagues, and what has their kind of response been, if any?
Well, some of them like, man, I didn't know you could paint. And I have one friend, he's a retired homicide detective for the LA County Sheriff's Department. And he gave me the best comment. He goes, Kevin, you're the Renaissance man. Because,
Yeah.
I drove a heavy semi in the Army. When I got out, I worked high-rise steel. And then at night, I taught the apprentice school. I was a president, a local and business agent. And then they dropped the age limit. I became a cop. I was a motor cop. I've done a little bit of everything in my life. He said, you know what? You're the Renaissance man. That's a great
Yeah.
compliment. For me, I look at more of them, a jack of all trades,
Mhm.
you got to have a rounded life. If you have a rounded life, I think for me, I'm happier. If I get bored with one thing too long, then I move on, and it keeps it interesting. So, but I've always liked drawing. My mother used to encourage me because I could draw as a little kid. I
Mhm.
lived next door to at the time he was fairly famous native artist painter.
Mhm.
And my dad did some work. My dad was a building contractor. So he said, hey, my mom told me, hey, he can draw. And so he saw it and he started having me come on Saturdays and teach me. I was only like 8 years old. And
Yeah.
so, that's where it started. So.
Very cool. And would you say that's what led you to choosing painting, or was there something else that really led you toward painting rather than just pencil and paper drawing or something like that?
Well, I grew up in Southern California, right? So I had there was people that I knew that worked for Disney as I got older,
Mm.
and a lot of people when I was in high school, I was in all the art classes, and a lot of people were trying to maybe one day get a job with Disney because it was a big company, and but I also because of my dad, I always took an interest in buildings, and
Mhm.
so I thought I'd either be an artist or an architect, but at the same time, I wanted to be a police officer, and I
Yeah.
saw a movie when I was a teenager called Electric Light and Blue. I went, "Oh man, I got to be a motor cop." So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I wanted to do and steered me, but you know, I didn't. It wasn't just one thing; it's whatever worked out, and that's how it worked out. So
Yeah, that sounds and your comment about being a jack of all trades, like that's it's always like I'm always in kind of the school of thought of you at least try it once. And if it doesn't work out, you move on to something else. And that's how I think a lot of people end up finding the medium that works best for them is just you try it and one eventually sticks. So it's a great, well-rounded way of there's a lot of things that kind of bring you to one specific thing, which is kind of neat. And kind of a big kind of cornerstone of this exhibit is the fact that art can be such a therapeutic exercise for anyone really, but especially for law enforcement officers who have a very difficult job, a very stressful job. They see their communities at simultaneously at their best and at their worst. And art is kind of a good way to process all of that. So, if you could encourage any of your colleagues or other fellow law enforcement retirees to take up something creative, what would you say to them?
well, I mean, like I said, I have a lot of different interests. I'm really into old cars and motorcycles, and I have an old Harley that I used to ride on the LAPD's motorcycle drill team that belonged to me, not the city, a 1942 Harley that I restored with my sons. And I'm into old cars, and so that was what I was doing on my time off. I worked two jobs all the time. And when I was a motor cop, I worked the movie studios off duty. That's what a lot of us do. But you got to have something away from the job. And actually, LAPD used to give us classes on wellness classes because we had, I mean, I hate to say it, we had a high suicide rate, like a lot of big city police departments. So they would come in and talk to us about, it can't be all about the job, and you have to have some non-cop friends once in a,
Yeah.
here, and we don't want to see you, sitting at the bar on your day off. You need to go out and have some kind of an outlet. Mine was working on old cars, motorcycles, and having that in common with my sons. But I did like, painting is the same thing. It's doing what you like and what gets your mind off of all the negative garbage you deal with on a daily basis. Because you're dealing with people's problems all day, and after a while, cops are humans too. We have problems too. You know,
Oh,
it's not just nobody's got a market, a corner on that market. So yeah, you have to have something healthy. And some people, I also like going fishing when I was a kid and deep sea fishing. I knew cops that did that. I knew cops that got up every morning. One guy, a detective in West LA, he would get up every morning and go surfing. He had drove an old Woody. He goes surfing every morning. That was his therapy. So
yeah,
whatever it is works for you. It's important to have something away from the job. Absolutely.
definitely. And kind of my final question that I have for you, the National Law Enforcement Museum, at first glance, especially, doesn't seem like the most likely place to have an art exhibit. And yet here we are, and we have obviously 50 great examples of law enforcement officers that retired and active duty that are artists and using this creative outlet and telling their stories through these really creative ways. And you're one of those 50 artists that's featured. So what does it mean to you to have one of your paintings on display in this exhibit at the National Law Enforcement Museum?
First of all, I think it's very important that you have this, and I'll tell you why. Because since I've started painting, I just started painting again just a couple of years ago. Not all um, art exhibits or what have you, and I want to word this the right way to not sound negative, but as soon as they say anything in law enforcement, a lot of these people, they're not going to say it to you, but they really there's a lot of negativity out there about police. And one of the reasons I paint police stuff is I'm trying to promote the profession in a positive way. Okay. So I think your venue is very important. I hope that you guys continue to do it because it gives officers a place to put out their art, and it also allows officers to see it and go, hey, that's really cool. And I want to see more police art. You know what I mean? So I think it's very important. Now, for me personally, like most of your artists that you've talked to, it's a great honor. But more than that, it's also a part of my legacy. I'm not a young man anymore. I've got grandkids. Three of my granddaughters are actually artists. I got a couple of them coming from California, come staying with my wife and I. They draw, they're really good. And so we're going to sit down and have a little art class together as part of their time they spend with grandma and grandpa. But it's part of my legacy. So when I'm gone, maybe someday some copper is going to see my work and go, hey, that's pretty cool, So I think it's also something that says something about you. And not, hey, we're not cops 24 hours a day. We got lives too. And this is part of it, right?
Definitely. I think it's kind of just like you said, it's a really great way to show the very human side of these law enforcement officers, the kind of looking at where the officers are real people that have hobbies, that have other interests. They're far more than, just like we all are, they're far more than just their job. And I think that's an especially important thing for us to talk about here. And we're a great place to do that. So I'm glad that you recognize that. And I think our visitors are recognizing that as well. And we're very pleased. And just as much as you guys are honored to be part of the exhibit, we're honored to be telling your stories this way.
Well, we also, every year, and I was going to do it the one year, and then something, I forget what happened, but LAPD sends out a squad of motors to escort your bike ride on Police Week. So my hopes in this year that maybe some of them came in there and saw all the artwork in the museum.
Definitely. I'm sure they did. We definitely had a lot of people that came through the exhibit and a lot of people that commented on the exhibit as well during Fleet Week this year. So that's the perfect time for people to see it and really learn something from it. And we've gotten an overwhelmingly positive response, which we always really like too. So, and means a lot for you guys to hear that as well as us who have worked to help put this together. So, but yeah, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today about your piece. Our visitors, our listeners here that are listening to this episode can see Kevin's piece, BCMC, as well as 49 other pieces from officers from around the country at the National Law Enforcement Museum in our Officers as Artists exhibit. We highly encourage you to take the time to come and see us this summer and experience all these officers' pieces and their stories for yourself. So, Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to this special bonus content featuring an artist from the museum's temporary exhibit, Officers as Artists, where the artworks of 50 law enforcement officers from all over the country are on display now through August 30th of this year. And remember, our core shows are released every other Wednesday, so don't miss those. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and come see us in Washington, D.C. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the Precinct.